Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Lauren Vincent. I'm the Investment and Program Director here at ARENA, and you've joined us for what is the second of 3 information webinars regarding the Future Made in Australia Innovation Fund. And today's session is going to be focused on our low carbon liquid fuels focus area. For those who joined us yesterday, we had our renewable energy technology manufacturing focus area session. And then later this afternoon, we have our final session on green metals. For anyone who joined us yesterday, just note the sort of first half hour or so of content will be focused on the program. The program particulars, the content will be the same across all 3 webinars. And then the second half, you'll hear from some of our colleagues in the fuels team who'll give you some more focused content on the low carbon liquid fuels focus area. So I wanted to start by firstly acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands of which we are all gathering here today, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And we recognise here at ARENA that the ongoing connection to country that our projects have being deployed right around Australia and the Torres Strait Islands. So next slide, please, Will. So this is just a bit of a rundown of what we're going to be covering today. So I'm going to start with a bit of an overview of ARENA, as well as some details around the program, its guidelines and our assessment process. We'll give you a rundown of both the eligibility and the merit criteria of the program, and then we'll spend the second half focused on the low carbon liquid fuels focus area and save some time at the end for Q&A. Next slide. So for those of you that don't know, ARENA is the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, and we were established back in 2012. And so our purpose is to support the global transition to net zero emissions, and we do that by providing grant funding to accelerate the pace of pre-commercial innovation to the benefit of all Australians. Next slide, thanks. So these are just some of our investments on a page. So since 2012, we've invested a bit over $3 billion to a little over 800 projects, although these numbers are correct as of September last year. So there's a little bit of movement there. We've invested in projects right around the country across a broad range of technology types. And important to note that the technologies shown here are both reflect our current portfolio as well as our historical portfolio. And at ARENA, within our mandate, we're able to fund a broad range of project types from studies, feasibility feed, through R&D, through to demonstrations and later stage deployments as well. Next slide, thanks. So now I'm going to jump into the program particulars. So some of you may be aware that the government has launched its Future Made in Australia plan, the Future Made in Australia agenda, in which the Future Made in Australia Innovation Fund is one pillar. So the broader FMA plan is a $22.7 billion package, and that's aimed at maximising the economic and industrial benefits of Australia to move to net zero. And so there are broad FMA focuses in which the Innovation Fund does align. And so those are around enabling investment and improving economic resilience and security within Australia, backing Australian innovations and investing in people and places. And there are FMA priorities that sit right across the broad agenda, these being green metals, low carbon liquid fuels, renewable energy manufacturing, hydrogen and critical minerals. And so the FMA Innovation Fund is going to focus on 3 of these priorities. And important to note that renewable hydrogen and critical minerals processing is actually areas that we can fund here at ARENA through alternative programs. And so the FMA Innovation Fund has $1.5 billion in grant funding available and is intended to support pre-commercial innovation and deployment of technologies linked to the focus areas, and where our goal is to see if we can try to create a stronger, more resilient and diversified economy powered by clean energy. Next slide, thanks. So these are the outcomes across the entirety of the program, and you'll see that each of the focus areas also have their own outcomes that are tied back to these. And so what we're trying to do across the program is increase the uptake of technologies aligned to the focus areas through innovation and commercialization activities. We're looking to improve Australia's capability and capacity, support stronger supply chains, and as is important across many ARENA programs, improve knowledge, skills, and workforce participation. The overall objective of the program is to fund innovative projects that benefit Australia's transition to net zero. Next slide, please. And so this is a bit of a snapshot of the entirety of the program. And so we've got 3 focus areas, as I've said. We've got $750 million that's being made available to the green metal stream. And as I mentioned earlier, we have an information session on that happening this afternoon. We have a renewable energy technology manufacturing stream in which there's an initial tranche of $200 million available, but with a total allocation of $500 million. And so that stream is focused on supporting the manufacturing of various technologies that we've prioritised there. And if you are interested in more information on that stream, as I said, the webinar content will be made available on our website soon. And today's focus is on the $250 million focus area of low carbon liquid fuels, and we'll go into a lot more detail on that later on. Next slide, thanks. And so important to note that we have designed elements of this program in conjunction with our departmental colleagues. So this has been a group effort. And so we have worked with DQ, Ditrica and DISA on the development of the broad program. And with this particular focus area being low carbon liquid fuels, we've worked most closely with the colleagues at Ditrica, the Department of Infrastructure. And so that's an ongoing partnership that we're looking to continue. And a few things to note about the way that we have designed the program. So firstly, we've introduced 2 various streams, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on what they entail on the next slide. As I said, we've got focus areas with various priorities that you would need to align to, and we'll cover more detail on low carbon liquid fuels in a moment. We expect in most instances for it to be a 2-stage process, but very importantly, we have designed this to be a very open and collaborative program, which means that you can be connected with somebody within ARENA in order to get support on your application. And we've actually introduced a requirement for endorsement from our team. And so the way in which you would get that endorsement is you can make contact. If you've got an existing contact, you can reach out to them. Otherwise, we've got a contact form available on our website where you can submit information about your concept or your proposal. And through that process, you'll be connected with a team member who'll be able to provide you more specific advice. And the reason why we're requiring that endorsement is to ensure that what you're submitting is aligned to the program. It's to save you effort and time if it's not, so that we can get you to a quick yes or a quick no without going through an entire application process. And one of the things that we do at ARENA is, your client manager or your investment manager is there to really provide you that support and guidance to ensure that your proposal has the best chance of success that it can. And we are requiring within this program, ideally match funding in most cases where it's possible, and broad eligibility is TRL 3 to 9, although within this focus area, it's starting at TRL 4. Next slide, thanks. So as I said, we've introduced the concept of having 2 separate sort of application streams within the program, that being one being the innovation stream and the other being the deployment stream. So these 2 streams apply across all focus areas. We have not introduced a funding threshold that determines which stream you might sit in. And that's quite intentional because we recognise across the 3 focus areas, there's a huge amount of variation and diversity around the types of projects that we might see, and that a dollar threshold doesn't necessarily indicate, I guess, the appropriate risk profile of various projects. And so the intent of this approach has been taken from learnings across the 10 plus years in which we've been delivering funding programs to ensure that we can apply a more risk-based approach to our assessment process. And the intent there is to be able to accelerate the projects where they need accelerating, and to be able to apply more detailed diligence where that's also necessary. And so the 2 key differences between these streams being innovation is really focused on sort of the earlier stage technology development and pilots. This would include some various feasibility and feed studies, for example. And we expect in those cases, those projects to not be generating significant revenue, if at all, compared to projects coming through the deployment stream that we expect to be focused on more mature technologies, a little bit further down the TRL scale, and likely to be generating some revenue, although we recognise there would definitely still be a need for grant support. And as I said, this is about trying to find ways in which we can accelerate people through the process where necessary. Next slide, please. So important to note that the Future Made in Australia Innovation Fund is classified as FMA support under the Future Made in Australia Act. And so that legislative requirement comes with a few added extras that we won't typically see on ARENA programs. And so the most critical of those is the requirement for projects to align to the community benefit principles. And this is a requirement of ARENA to note when we're making our funding decisions, whether that be from the Minister, the Board, or our CEO or others. And so within the Act, these are the requirements that are specified. And so applicants will, and our team will be able to provide further advice on this, but applicants will be required to produce a Future Made in Australia plan that needs to be in writing and explain how the project is going to demonstrate benefits against the community benefit principles. And just to note that future rules can be created at a point in time, but we'll make all this information available should there be any changes. And so next slide. So these are the community benefit principles as outlined in the Act, in the FMA Act, I should say. And these are also listed in the program guidelines if you need support. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but certainly our team can provide more advice regarding interpretation of these principles. So maybe we'll jump to the next slide. We've given a bit of advice and some support of various resources that might help you in terms of understanding the sorts of activities and things that you might be able to do in terms of meeting the community benefit principles. But important to note that our colleagues at DISA have been running a consultation process across January to refine the way that these are being implemented across FMA support programs. And we do expect further guidance and information to be made available in the coming weeks or months. And certainly the ARENA team is here to be able to work with you and guide you through this process in terms of understanding obligations and what's required of you. Important to note that we will absolutely be applying a proportionality consideration in terms of the CBPs. And so what that means is if you are applying, say, more R&D focused or a study focused project, we don't expect you to be able to demonstrate the same benefit as what we might see of a larger scale deployment. So certainly that proportionality consideration will be taken into account there. But we've just provided on this slide some examples of the kinds of things that you may consider doing that could demonstrate alignment to the CBPs. And so that's things like development of business policies that might outline your workforce arrangements. You may be working with various communities and have agreements or contracts with them. You might be considering learning and development programs, resourcing targets, workforce targets, and various other activities. But please come and talk to us and we'll provide as best guidance as we can. Next slide, please. So just quickly, I'll run through our assessment process. So this is ARENA's typical assessment process on a page. So as I said, under this program, you are required to seek endorsement before you apply. And that's, as I said, to make sure that your project is right fit for the program. And also the other point to note is if you aren't the right fit for the Future Made in Australia Innovation Fund, we do have various other programs in which you might be more suited to as well. So certainly our team can provide that broad advice. But the first step would be to submit an online proposal form that would be outlining your concept. You'll be connected with a team member who will spend some time working through your concept with you. And when you're ready, we'll give you the green light to go ahead and submit. Now, depending on the size and the scale of the project and which stream you're coming through, if it's innovation or deployment, you may be required to submit an EOI, which will be an initial sort of first stage application. Otherwise, you might be given the green light to move through to a one-stage process, and our team provided advice on that. In both instances, either EOI or a full application, that application will be assessed by our advisory panel, a panel of experts that we have available to us. And then if recommended by the panel, then you're given the green light to move through our approval process. So we've given some timing indications here. These are just a guide. Some might be able to move faster, some might be slower. It really depends on the complexity of your project, your own timelines, and how motivated you are in terms of pulling your materials together. Important to note, of course, you'll be then required to enter into a funding agreement with ARENA. So we have 2 different templates available on our website. And again, those will be custom made depending if you're coming through the innovation stream or the deployment stream. What we do expect is if you're coming through the innovation stream, that would be a much lighter touch agreement, minimal departures, for example, and we have a little bit more flexibility on that deployment option. Next, now I'll hand over to Will now.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. So hello everyone, my name is Will Reeves and I'm an investment manager in the investments and portfolio group here at Arena. And so I'm going to take you through a quick rundown of the specific eligibility and merit criteria under the Innovation Fund. And I think to start off, two broad concepts. Eligibility, we can consider the specific characteristics of a project that allow you to get your foot in the door in relation to the requirements of the program and what the program is hoping to achieve, whereas the merit criteria links to the overall assessment and I guess quality of that project and can be linked to the design, financial viability and the overall capability and capacity of the applicant undertaking the project. But I can walk through each of those in detail. So 5 eligibility criteria, applicant, project, intellectual property, compliance, and other requirements that will be contained within the guidelines, and encourage you to keep in mind that this webinar should be considered in conjunction with the program guidelines and the specific fuels focus areas. So eligibility criteria A is related to the applicant themselves. So an applicant must hold an Australian business number, ABN, and B of the following Australian entity incorporated under the Corporations Act, or an Australian state or territory owned corporation or subsidiary of an Australian state or territory owned corporation, alternatively an Australian local government or council that is purposed with representing and supporting local governments or councils. And then finally, or an Australian university or other form of research institution or an entity operating as a CRC, and that can link to the overall innovation element of the fund that we have previously discussed. Eligibility criteria B is on the project itself, so linking to the specifics of that, activities that primarily take place in Australia. And then the technology is something that primarily investigates, at a minimum, has an established proof of concept of TRL3. We will note that under the fuels program, we have specific requirements for TRL4, which my colleagues will refer to later in the presentation. And then the technology is something that ARENA is lawfully capable of funding, being a renewable energy or enabling energy efficiency or electrification technology. Criteria C is related to the IP compliance and broader other requirements under the program. So the applicant must warrant it has ownership of and access to the beneficial use of any intellectual property necessary to carry out the project, compliance with the Workplace Gender Equality Act in 2012 and its related bodies. Corporate must not be named as an organisation that is on the list of persons or entities designated as terrorists, and is not contravened in the Australian sanction laws or be included or intend to join the National Redress Scheme. Other applicable requirements, such as those related to the Modern Slavery Act or climate performance, encourage you to refer to the program guidelines for further detail within them. Moving on to the merit criteria, if anyone has previously engaged with ARENA or had an ARENA project, these should look quite familiar and are broadly consistent across all of our programs, being 5 criteria, considering the alignment to the outcomes of the program, applicant capability and capacity, the design or execution of the project, financial viability, and then finally knowledge sharing, which can be the main return on investment for ARENA. So merit A is where it's their contribution to the technology focus area, objectives and outcomes. And so this is broadly the alignment of the overall project itself and how that project will advance any goals, targets, metrics contained within the focus areas. That could be emissions reduction or specifically related fuels items, which we can get into later. And then linking to the overall purpose of the fund, the innovation potential. So be that commercialization pathway or manufacturing opportunity if it's related to the RETM focus area as well. And then, as Lauren previously alluded to, how well the project contributes to the community benefit principles. And I'll just reiterate Lauren's earlier point that the community benefit principles would be applied on a sliding scale and not expecting a smaller innovation or R&D style project to have the same community benefit impact as a large deployment style project. Merit B is related to the applicant capability and capacity, and so this is the overall expertise and experience of the applicant and related parties within the project consortium to actually execute on the project. So that can be demonstrated through the track record in delivering outcomes from similar activities on time and on budget, and experience and any relevant accreditations, quality standards, or benchmarks. Equally on the capacity, that is how well resourced the applicant is to execute on the project. And that can include personnel, equipment, plant, facilities. And equally, I think important to call out here that where there are any gaps identified or current gaps, how those plan to be addressed through the project to ensure that there is the sufficient capacity requirements. And then that understandably links to the community benefit principles in having the appropriate resources to appropriately deliver on the CBPs contained within the project. So Merit C is related to the actual design and execution of the overall project itself, and can consider that within the schedules, timelines, work streams, but equally a consideration of risk. And so we consider that for managing and reporting personnel, delivery, technical and financial risks of the project. And important to call out that where there are risks identified, we would expect to see appropriate risk mitigation strategies or pathways to address these. And then also the risk of negotiating and executing a funding agreement with ARENA, and would encourage potential applicants to review the standard T's and C's contained within the ARENA funding agreement that is contained on our website, and then compliance with any other requirements under the program guidelines that we've previously alluded to. Important to call out here is related to the varying streams. So as Lauren previously alluded to, the program will have both an innovation and deployment stream, and we would expect to see varying levels of projects within that, and varying styles and levels of definition within the program design that is put forward, and can expect that in a deployment stream, we would expect to see an increasing level of rigor and, I guess, refined scope within that, but also consideration for the Future Made in Australia plan that may be required, and would encourage you to speak to your ARENA representative through the process of designing the project and the ultimate project plan. Merit D is related to financial viability and co-funding, and the key piece here is trying to assess whether the project is commercially viable without ARENA funding, and so expecting that can be shown through what would happen if the project did not receive ARENA funding, or what is the key unlock or catalyst that ARENA funding is able to provide within this. You can demonstrate merit through quality and completeness of a project budget, and expecting to see evidence or quotes to substantiate the figures that are presented within that, the proposed budget or payment structure, cash, in-kind contributions, and then also the level of financial contributions from the applicant or the overall project consortium, and just ensuring that there's sufficient skin in the game from the entity applying. And then also around project economics, and that this can be really crucial in justifying the overall ARENA funding requirements, and linked to the provision of a financial model where appropriate, and would encourage you to speak to your ARENA representative. But that can be speaking to the ability to sensitize key variables and how we view project returns with and without grant funding. And so key benchmarks within this will be the IRR and NPV of project cash flows. Merit E is related to knowledge sharing, and so as I previously said, this would be the key return on investment for ARENA. And so how will the value of the knowledge generated from this project contribute to the technology focus areas? How well is the knowledge sharing plan integrated into the overall purpose of the project? And somewhat linking to Merit B, including appropriate allocation of resources to fully deliver on these outcomes, consideration of data, information, lessons learned, but then equally the methodology. And so how will this knowledge sharing be disseminated to the market? Will it be publicly available, privately available to ARENA only? And then related to that, any constraints that may prevent the sharing and knowledge of that information itself. And so that concludes the overall eligibility and merit criteria overview. I'll now introduce Alex, who is the General Manager within our fuels team, who will take you through the focus areas.
Thanks, Will, and great to be here with so many people on the line. And I guess the overarching reason that we're here today is because Australia's transport sector has an emissions problem. So as you'll see on the slide, in the year to June 2025, Australia's transport sector produced just under 100 million tonnes of carbon emissions. And when you consider some other sectors that have vehicles and other transport modes inside them, such as off-road mining or even international emissions within Australian origin, this pushes past and makes the addressable pool of emissions even higher. Thinking back over the last year, transport was actually the only sector that increased emissions, and this was driven by increasing demand for freight, slower progress in harder to abate sectors, and also an increase in petrol and fuel and diesel demand. Now, over time, this trajectory is actually set to continue, driven by increases in population and slower progress than we'd otherwise like. So given that our current needs are predominantly met with fossil-based liquid fuels, this raises the question, how are we going to give up these emissions? And current projections released over the last few months show two pathways. The first is that electrification is going to do some of the heavy lifting, and around 50% of the challenge will be solved, and more in sectors such as passenger vehicles. However, remaining sectors have technical barriers which need overcoming. If you look to the aviation and shipping sectors, these would require a step change in battery energy density to move beyond some flights that are electrified on shorter regional routes. In the mining and other off-road sectors, there's actually plenty of pathways being investigated. And then in heavy road freight, this may benefit from faster deployment overseas, R&D efforts. But otherwise, the trajectory shows that the increase in electrification for shorter duty cycles is actually vastly outweighed by increases in volume, and otherwise the harder to electrify routes just don't get a dent. So on our current technology horizons, these sectors that are hard to electrify are going to rely on low carbon liquid fuels to enable material emissions reductions by 2030. So on the next slide, you'll see that in 2025, we consulted with key stakeholders on the barriers and proposed solutions to decarbonising these hard to electrify sectors. There were four key messages that we heard. And the first was there's a persistent funding gap for technology and project development, as well as for first of a kind deployment. We also heard strong calls for sustainable aviation fuel and renewable diesel as key products to support the local production of, with higher support for methanol than we heard a few years ago. We also had many data points from that the various production pathways are at various levels of technical and commercial readiness, and they actually need different types of support depending on how the mature those sectors are. And lastly, there's a broad policy suite required to stand up this sector. So on the next slide, and in response to these consultation views heard, we've developed three focus areas under the Future Made in Australia Innovation Fund that seek to address these challenges. So this represents the next wave of the Australian government's support for low carbon liquid fuel sector, and it covers developed and emerging pathways, as well as the broader ecosystem, including feedstock and infrastructure. I'll now hand to Tom Connell, Associate Director in the Investments team, to discuss these areas in detail.
Thanks, Alex, and good morning, everyone. My name's Tom Connell. I'm the investment lead in the transport team here at ARENA, and I'm now going to take you through a little bit more detail on what each focus area is aiming to do. Next slide, please. As mentioned by Alex, Focus Area 1 aims to accelerate commercial scale production of low carbon liquid fuels in Australia, which means projects that are approaching investment decision and or deployment. In practice, this includes activities such as pre-feed and feed studies and the detailed technical and commercial work required to progress a project toward final investment decision. It also includes capital and infrastructure costs where projects have reached deployment readiness, building on mature technologies that are at a high TRL or already deployed internationally. The types of projects expected under this focus area are those that are meaningfully advance the establishment of domestic production capacity at commercial scale. Based on the scale of these projects, we anticipate that they will be led by organisations with an established role in fuel production or project development, such as refiners, renewable fuel developers, and/or major suppliers. Typically, these proponents will work with a broader consortium structure, including feedstock providers, technology partners, engineering firms, and off-takers, with a strategic interest in seeing the facility reach operations. The example showed on this slide illustrates a hypothetical project, a consortium seeking around $15 million of ARENA funding to support a $75 million FEED study for a commercial scale HEFA facility. The study would cover detailed engineering, permitting, feedstock and offtake arrangements, as well as project finance activities, ultimately enabling the proponent to reach an informed investment decision. In terms of funding expectations, the expected ranges of 5 to 15 million for development stage activities and 20 to 50 million for deployment. And I'll note that these are not strict limits, but any projects that would be seeking funding outside of these ranges would need to demonstrate a conspicuously high merit and contribution to the program outcomes. So overall, Focus Area 1 aims to build a credible, investable and scalable low carbon liquid fuel industry in Australia by supporting the key development and deployment activities required to bring commercial scale projects to market. Next slide, please. Moving on now to Focus Area 2, we're supporting pre-commercial technology demonstration. So this focus area is intended to support projects that are advancing technologies through the early commercialization pathway, typically at TRL4 and above. These are technologies that have progressed beyond laboratory validation and now require pilot scale or demonstration scale facilities to prove out the performance, reliability, and certification against relevant standards. Under this focus area, ARENA is seeking to support activities including project development work, such as engineering, design, and technology development, as well as equipment, infrastructure, and operational costs associated with building and operating a pilot or demonstration facility. It can also cover testing and certification activities, which is essential for many of the emerging production pathways to be recognised under international fuel standards. The types of projects we're seeking here are those that help bridge the gap between early R&D and commercial deployment. So that could include demonstrating a new production pathway, validating a novel conversion step, or carrying a technology through the rigorous certification processes required for fuels. Given the nature of these projects, we expect that lead applicants will include technology developers, OEMs, startups, and refiners or fuel suppliers that are working to bring an emerging technology to market. These projects are typically delivered in partnership with research institutions, industry collaborators, or value chain partners who contribute specialist expertise and facilities. The example highlighted provides a representative case, a renewable fuel startup seeking $7.5 million in ARENA funding towards a $20 million demonstration facility to advance the new power-to-liquid process and undertake the necessary testing and certification activities. Finally, the indicative grant range of 2 to 10 million reflects the target scale of pilot and demonstration projects. Again, these are not strict limits, and ARENA can consider proposals outside these bounds. So overall, Focus Area 2 plays a critical role in de-risking emerging technologies, generating the evidence base needed for investors and industry, and building the pipeline of technologies that can progress forward to commercial deployment. And next slide, please. So our third focus area seeks to enable the feedstock and supply chain. This focus area is designed to support the development of the biogenic feedstocks and enabling infrastructure required to establish a credible, scalable, low-carbon liquid fuel supply. While the earlier focus areas concentrate on production technologies themselves, this focus area addresses the upstream and midstream components that must mature in parallel to ensure that we have long-term sector viability. Under this focus area, ARENA can support a range of feedstock-related activities, including the development, processing and deployment of novel biogenic feedstocks, as well as innovation associated with established feedstocks. This may include field trials, improvements to crop or residue productivity, or new preparation and processing methodologies that improve consistency, yield, or sustainability. In addition to feedstock development, this focus area also supports enabling infrastructure and supply chain innovation. That includes the development and deployment of infrastructure that facilitates the efficient movement, aggregation, processing, or upgrading of feedstocks, as well as infrastructure that helps address known supply chain bottlenecks. Projects under this focus area will typically be led by biogenic feedstock producers, aggregators, traders, renewable fuel refiners and suppliers, or relevant startups. As with the other focus areas, delivery is often undertaken in partnership with research institutions, industry collaborators, or organisations positioned within the broader fuel value chain. The example on the slide indicates a representative project. An agricultural and seed technology startup is seeking $5 million in grant funding to support a $15 million plantation and testing facility. And this would propose to optimize the production yield of Pongamia oil as a biogenic feedstock through genetics testing and management practice trials supported by a commercial off-taker and commodity trading partner. The indicative grant range for this focus area is 1 to 10 million, reflecting the assumed scale of feedstock trials, enabling infrastructure deployments and associated supply chain activities. And once again, projects that can demonstrate high merit may be able to request grants outside this range. So in conclusion, Focus Area 3 is playing a vital role in ensuring that Australia develops not only the technologies to produce fuels, but also the feedstock availability and supply chain capability required to sustain them. I'll now pass the mic to Samira to talk about sustainability considerations.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. My name is Samira Tadikonda. I'm also part of the investments team for LCLF at ARENA. I'm going to take you through a quick snapshot of what we require from our projects in terms of sustainability requirements. It's a foundational requirement, and starting with quantifying emissions reductions, our projects need to clearly quantify their emissions reductions potential by comparing their technology to the conventional fossil fuel. And this is supported by a prelim lifecycle assessment at the application stage. Now, this matters because an LCA gives us confidence that projects genuinely reduce emissions, they support compliance, build stakeholder trust, and identify improvement opportunities. Now, the applicants need to comply with ARENA's LCA guidelines. These were updated recently in October 2025 and reflect developments in LCA methods, offer more streamlined reporting requirements for our applicants, and better align with international and domestic standards. They represent ARENA's view, and it's our preferred approach for applicants seeking funding. We actually hosted a webinar on it in November 2025, and a recording of it is available on our website. So along with the guidelines, it's a great resource to refer to. Second, talking about sustainability frameworks, applicants also need to nominate the sustainability framework that they will comply with, whether that's CORSIA for aviation or the IMO net zero framework for shipping or the EU schemes or third-party certifications. The key is demonstrating how the project meets the requirements of whichever framework applies to the project. The guarantee of origin scheme. So as we know, it is yet to go live, but once it does, the commercial scale projects funded under our 2025 LCLF focus areas will need to meet the relevant guarantee of origin requirements once the scheme begins. Thank you. That's all from me. I'll pass it to Martin Gulbis to talk through some of our other feedstock items.
Thank you, Samira. Next slide, please. So I'm Martin Gulbis. I'm an investment manager, part of the investments team, and my core focus is on LCLF projects. So there are other important considerations for projects that align with the priority fuel types and sectors. For fuel types, while there are a range of fuels that can be produced, the priority fuels have been set where there is the highest potential for innovation and greatest demand. As a result, sustainable aviation fuel, renewable diesel, and methanol are considered priority fuels, with other fuels as their end product, including biodiesel, biomethane, hydrogen, and/or ammonia, are not in scope for funding. If your project fits under Focus Area 3 and is feedstock or infrastructure based, it is important to note you do not need to produce the fuel as part of the scope of the project. However, a credible pathway to producing or sourcing that fuel must be outlined. This may include identifying those associated partners. In terms of priority sectors, low carbon liquid fuels can be used in a wide range of applications. However, with the limited availability of the fuels, it's important that these are reserved for the high impact use cases where there are limited alternatives for decarbonisation. While there's a wide range of use cases in scope, you'll need to put forward why your proposed offtake sector is considered hard to abate. Next slide, please. Feedstocks are critical for the production of LCLF, and it is important applicants understand ARENA's requirements and standards in relation to feedstock. This is to ensure they align with ARENA's mandate and have a sound basis for LCLF production without creating any adverse or negative impacts to humans, land, or environment. First and foremost, feedstocks must align with the renewable feedstock definition, otherwise ARENA is unable to fund the project. This is a critical point to be clear on and to put forward in any discussions with ARENA. The renewable feedstock definition is as outlined, with guidance provided on feedstocks that are considered accepted or out of scope. ARENA can provide further guidance to clarify whether your feedstock meets this definition or not. In terms of feedstock impact, the impact of the use of feedstock is evaluated by considering multiple factors, including land use. Are there any land use impacts due to using this feedstock for LCLF production? For example, will using this feedstock create competition for prime agricultural land? Will it impact ecosystems or biodiversity, or result in deforestation? Alternatively, will it generate a benefit? The community impact. Will this feedstock create any impact to local communities, traditional owners, or other First Nations communities? And as well as competing feedstock use. Where is the feedstock currently utilised? And will using it for LCLF production displace higher and better use applications, creating negative impacts such as food displacement? You will also need to outline whether the feedstock will be available in the long term and is considered sustainable. With these measures, this is how ARENA ensures it looks to support the development of a sector with appropriate consideration of impact and with robust long-term sustainability credentials. You'll be required to provide this detail as part of your application. Next slide, please. So the previous slides have outlined a range and type of projects that are in scope for funding. This slide makes clear what is specifically out of scope. And this includes projects with a technology readiness level below 4. This requires a minimum of an early stage technology validation to fit in the focus area. As mentioned previously, projects producing the end products of biodiesel, biomethane, hydrogen, and/or ammonia as the end product are not in scope. Feedstocks focusing on the production of mature, commercially developed biogenic feedstocks as the primary activity, such as the cultivation of existing canola crop with no improvements or innovation, are out of scope. Projects focus on the development of direct air capture technology, and feedstocks that do not align with the renewable feedstock definition. Again, further information on this can be found in the technology focus area document. Now over to you, Zach, for the wrap-up.
Thanks, Martin. Hi all, I'm Zach Ahmed, a senior investment analyst within our investments team, and I'll wrap this up before the Q&A. This slide outlines what a good concept looks like when engaging with ARENA at the start of our assessment process. So first, if you can please review the program documentation to ensure you understand the program's objectives, eligibility, and merit criteria, and as well as how your concept aligns to the program overall. The more information you can provide about a concept, the more efficient the start of this process can be. The information we require from you will typically cover the following elements. So the first being strategic importance in terms of why is this project important to ARENA, the transport sector, and Australia overall. Second, we also require details on the project scope. So what's the proposed set of activities to be covered within the bounds of the ARENA project you are seeking funding for? Third is a technology overview. So defining the technology itself and what is innovative or distinctive about it. The fourth is information around the focus area alignment. So how your project aligns with the LCLF focus areas and supports the program objectives of FMA overall. Fifth, we require details around the project consortium. So definition around who the lead organization and its key project personnel are, but also information on delivery, offtake partners, and others as well. Finally, we also require information around the funding request itself, which includes the indicative project costs, the requested ARENA grant, and supporting rationale. All inquiries should be submitted through our funding advice form, where one of our investment team members will assess your concept and reach out to you with next steps. Within the funding advice form, please make sure to select a low carbon liquid fuels technology area to make sure this comes through to the appropriate personnel. After submitting your initial inquiry, we will typically seek further information in the form of approximately 5 slides that address the key outlined elements, and or set up a 30-minute concept call with yourselves and your project partners. As per the program guidelines, applicants will be only invited to submit an application once they've had their concept reviewed and endorsed by a member of our team. So if you have a concept to discuss with us, please reach out through the inquiry form. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Zach, maybe I can jump in now as we shift back to just a quick overview of the key dates and documents. So thanks to our team for the overview of the fuels focus areas. So key dates to bear in mind on this slide. So the Innovation Fund formally launched on 17th of December 2025. So online applications are open. However, we'll just reiterate Zach's comments around the requirement to have your concept formally endorsed by a member of our team prior to submitting that application, and encourage you to reach out to ARENA through the funding advice link that's available on our website. With the remaining time now, I'll invite my colleagues, Martin, Alex, Tom, and Lauren back onto the screen, and happy to move into a period of Q&A. You should be able to use the Q&A function available at the top of the webinar screen. I will just call out that it'll be difficult to discuss project specifics through this session, and encourage you to do that through our funding advice form, but we'll encourage or do our best to be as helpful as we can within that. So can take a quick look to see.
Sorry, Will, I think the slides are frozen on our end. I'm not sure. I think everyone's in the same boat, just so you know.
Oh, sorry. Is the Q&A coming up or no?
No, we're just saying the next step slide still. But that's all right. We can maybe take those down if they're not moving ahead, but all good. We're moving to Q&A anyway. So whilst Will is sorting out slides, we have got a few questions coming through. So one, which is a general question, which I'm happy to jump on, regarding whether the Innovation Fund will support Australian developed technologies that are being internationally developed, if they're eligible, if the Australian company is intending to commercialise and deploy in Australia. So the eligibility requirements are that it's an Australian entity that is applying, so you need to have an ABN and meet one of the categories that was listed earlier around Australian corporation, and that the project is being deployed in, or primarily occurring in Australia, being deployed, or the project activity is primarily happening in Australia. Other than that, we don't necessarily have any further requirements, but of course you need to have access to the IP. So in terms of where the technology originated, that we're somewhat agnostic to that, as long as we can see that there's a clear benefit to Australia. So looking through the further questions from there. So just for everyone's benefit, if you are interested, we've put available as well links to the ARENA web pages with the content that we have available for this session, if you need any further information about the project. So we have another question here. This is for the fuels team. So will there be an accompanying charge in excise rates and the diesel fuel rebate to accompany the LCLF focus area? That to the team.
Thanks, Lauren. I'll jump into a few of the published questions there. So yeah, obviously a complex environment with different subsidies and tax rates on fuels, both in off-road use of diesel, but also in aviation kerosene. The scope of those changes, beyond the remit of this program and what ARENA is able to influence, but certainly ongoing work being done by government in regards to a potential demand side measure, as has been flagged, but no changes to those aspects as part of this program. I'll keep going. They've got a question about, can a university act as the lead applicant under focus area 2? As set out in the funding guidelines, universities and other research institutions can be eligible applicants. So that ticks the box of, yes, you could do a project. Best to come and talk to the team about the specific project and who might be the best candidate or the best counterparty to be the lead applicant. But in terms of eligibility, that's fine. A question about low carbon liquid fuels in the construction and infrastructure sector, which relies heavily on diesel. So absolutely, it's the case that high use of diesel in stationary energy applications currently. As Alex kind of talked to in terms of how we think about hard to abate sectors, this funding is specifically for transport, for aviation, for those other categories that were mentioned. And part of the reason for that is that for many stationary energy applications, there are alternatives to fuels that we consider will be sort of more viable. Not for all of them, but transport has the higher need. And a couple more. We mentioned that the fund will support Australian developed technologies. Can internationally developed technologies be eligible if they're being commercialised in an Australian company? Yep. So there's no requirement for it to be green and gold kangaroo Aussie tech as part of the commercialisation necessarily, although we do love homegrown stories. So certainly technologies that want to come and do a demonstration or a pilot project in Australia would be something we'd be happy to discuss. And maybe one more before I hand over the mic. So regarding the innovation stream, how far upstream into feedstock technology is ARENA intending to include? Would we consider new feedstock crops for low carbon fuels? Yes. So as set out under focus area 3, we are looking to support the piloting, the testing, the demonstration of yields for novel feedstocks. So recommend going and having a read of the guidelines for that particular section. Cool. Might hand over to Alex or Martin.
I'll jump in here, Tom, and thanks everyone for posting some questions. Some really interesting topics here. There's one here on the lifetime of the fund and how long we expect the available funding to live on. So just talking to the quantum, first of all, $250 million of grant funding, that should spread across quite a few projects, particularly as we're working on both tech development, project development on feasibility studies and others. So the scope's quite broad. We do recognise that there is a project development timeframe here. So we'd encourage everyone on the line who has an idea, no matter how early, please to come forward, discuss with the team. And our assessment process does move with the maturity of the concept. So as additional work is progressed, there's a lower bar to come through for an expression of interest. And then obviously, as the project gets better defined, there's more work to do there. So we'd expect this to go over quite a while and not to have too much of a fear of missing out on it. But please get in touch if you do have a concept you'd like to work up. There's a second question I'll take in a few of these comments, which is the right program for me, noting that there are different pathways. Some involve some hydrogen and some have different use cases as well. So this is just to reflect that typically projects come through one funding program rather than applying to several. If you do think that if you're eligible to multiple concepts, worth mentioning that to the team as you reach out with your project scoping document. We generally look to the overall package of concessional funding though. So whether you're securing private and public funding from one source or multiple sources, we do look at that package, and it's typically from one ARENA program, and we'll help you find that best fit. I'll throw the microphone over to Martin now.
Thank you, Alex. So I might start with a question here about some of the, I guess, products that are out of scope for the low carbon liquid fuel stream. So had a few questions come in on that. So specifically biodiesel and biomethane, but this also applies to other products such as potentially ethanol and ammonia. So what we heard specifically for biodiesel and first generation ethanol from our consultation, that the level of innovation required to stimulate these production pathways is quite low, and as a result they're not a very good fit for this fund, which is an innovation fund with future scale up of biodiesel and ethanol likely to be influenced by policy decisions or other mechanisms such as that, which are out of scope of this fund and ARENA's remit. I'll touch on some of the other exclusions there, such as biomethane and ammonia. So biomethane can be considered under other ARENA funding programs, such as the Industrial Transformation Stream program, where biomethane is considered as a key lever for decarbonisation of heavy industry. So that's where biomethane could be considered eligible under other programs. And ammonia has been specifically excluded out of this program as well due to alignment with our existing hydrogen priority and hydrogen Head Start programs. On the ethanol side, it's first generation ethanol where we see that that's mostly been demonstrated. There is some potential there for innovation for more advanced waste-based ethanol technologies or related technologies. If you have something in that realm, please come speak to us. What we would need to see there is that sort of alignment through to SAF or renewable diesel production. Jumping to another, sorry, Lauren, you go.
No, you go. Keep going.
Another question here about the innovation stream in terms of how far upstream the LCLF feedstock technology ARENA is intending to include here. And so would that look to consider new feedstock crops if they meet that TRL 4 benchmark? So yes, we understand that feedstock is critical to help the scale up of LCLF production, and that's looking to find new sources of feedstock that can contribute to that supply. So if there's a new crop that you're looking to implement, that's something we'd be happy to have a conversation with you about. Did see another question there about farming existing canola. So what we're meaning there is, look, canola is already grown widespread around the country, so we would not look to support a new canola farm per se. What we'd look to do in the canola space is perhaps look at some level of innovation that could improve yields or better use marginal land, etc. So if you have something that's out of the realms of just normal canola cultivation, again, please reach out to us.
Thank you, Martin. I'm conscious that we are very much pushing up against our end time. So we still do have questions coming in. Wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who has stuck with us to this point. What we will do after this session is we will take a note of all questions that have been asked, and we will provide formal answers through our website through updating our FAQ sheet and making those answers available where we can. In terms of some of the general questions around, for example, alignment with ARP, or is my project eligible, etc. What we do encourage you to do is use the contact form, the proposal form, to reach out to the team, and they can provide you specific advice regarding your request. Our team is really here to help you navigate the funding vehicles and opportunities that we have available at ARENA, because we recognise that there can be alignment between various programs. So I want to wrap up there and say thank you for giving us your time today. For anyone that is interested in the Green Metals stream, we will be holding another webinar this afternoon starting at 3 p.m. Canberra time. If you are interested in joining that session, note the beginning content will be the same as you heard today. But otherwise, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to hearing about your proposals. Thank you, everyone.